Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. On today's show, this might be a record-setting show because I have not had this many tabs open when I do the show, especially for the news segment, probably ever. There's a lot to talk about on today's show, a lot to discuss, a lot to speculate about. So hopefully you guys are strapped in and ready to go. This first news story, I don't know if we talked about last week, but we'll talk about it again, but we'll run through it very quickly. Jim Caldwell to leave the Miami Dolphins. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. After taking a leave of absence from Flores staff before the season began, Dolphins assistant Jim Caldwell did not coach during this team season, and the former Colts and Lions head coach will not return to the Dolphins staff, reports Cameron Wolf of ESPN. So, I don't know if we talked about this last week, but we'll run through it very quickly. Jim Caldwell, a very successful coach, every stop that he's been in. Unfortunately, he's gotten the raw deal a couple times where it really wasn't his fault. If you look at all the times he was fired, you could make major excuses why that team wasn't living up to expectations. I don't think at any point Jim Caldwell did a bad job. So he's a very, 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 very talented coach, especially with a young quarterback coming in, and you have Josh Rosen still on the roster. His developmental skills with quarterbacks, his experience with really good quarterbacks and helping them and coaching really good quarterbacks, and every time he's been with a great quarterback, they've had either a career year or a really good season. So to lose that experience and that talent at the coaching position hurts, but I feel like the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick's presence is still felt in that locker room, and we heard from the Miami Herald and the Sun-Sentinel and the Palm Beach Post, all of the beat writers gush about how great Ryan Fitzpatrick was in the locker room. I feel like Ryan Fitzpatrick's presence replaces that a little bit. So although we're losing a really good coach, another really good coach, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's presence replaces some of the things that Jim Caldwell would have brought to the team. So just that's a quick run through. I don't know if we talked about that last week or not. We have much more cooler things to speculate about. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins considering a Joe Burrow trade-up. The Dolphins covet Joe Burrow, reports Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio. So, Mike Florio reports the Dolphins covet Joe Burrow, who adds owner Stephen Ross is driving the bandwagon for the player, expected to go number 1 overall. Although the Bengals are a lock to pick him at number 1, they recently retracted a report that they're not willing to trade down, which is really interesting. I did not know that about the Bengals. I didn't know that. They retracted that. It would take a massive trade haul for the Dolphins to move up to number 1, but they do have the necessary draft capital to make such a move. So this is a very interesting news story because number 1, I can 1000% see this happening. The last 2 years, when you look at the Kyler Murray situation and you look at the Lamar Jackson situation in Miami, both times the Dolphins were very close to getting both of those quarterbacks. The first time it was Lamar Jackson, and Stephen Ross really wanted Lamar Jackson. We ended up not doing that. We ended up picking Minka Fitzpatrick instead, but he wanted to trade back up into the first round to select Lamar Jackson. Now, how that would have worked out, I have no idea, because Lamar Jackson really fell into the right place, the right organization to really build around him to be successful. So it is a little stupid, in my opinion, to sit here and say, oh, well, Lamar Jackson could have done this or this with Adam Gase. Adam Gase didn't even want him. The organization was in shambles. The only one who wanted him in that organization was Stephen Ross. That's the reason he wasn't picked. So I feel like that would have been a train wreck if that did happen. You go to the next draft, and Kyler Murray was the coveted quarterback of that draft. I was a huge fan of Kyler Murray. I feel like he did pretty dang well for a rookie, actually really well. He has a very bright future. Kyler Murray, in my opinion, is a really good quarterback, and I really wanted him, and I know a lot of fans were kind of iffy on him because of some of his size issues and stuff like that, but the Dolphins really wanted him, and they had a trade in place with, I can't remember who it was. If the Cardinals didn't pick Kyler Murray, the Dolphins had a trade in place to trade up to get Kyler Murray. That's all I remember. I can't remember who the trade was. I can't remember the exact order of that specific draft. The point is, the last 2 years, the Dolphins have been heavily rumored to take one of these high-level quarterbacks. And we get yet another rumor that Stephen Ross is leading the bandwagon for Joe Burrow. I feel like this time it's going to happen. And the reason, I'm not even speculating, I just feel like this is going to happen for some reason. And the reason I feel that way is because of all of our first round draft picks and the amount of draft picks that we have. Now, would it be smart? This has nothing to do with my opinion. I just think this is going to happen. Number one, the Cincinnati Bengals do not like to spend money in free agency. They don't do it. Mike Brown, I think, is the owner. The name of their owner is notoriously cheap and doesn't spend. They're a small market team. They build their team through the draft. They've always done that. They've even taken chances on some players that might not have the greatest off the field history. And they're famous for that with what Marvin Lewis did with Adam Jones and Joe Mixon and some of the other players, Montez Burfict. So they always build it through the draft. So with that being said, I think it would be very enticing to the Bengals to have 2 extra first-round picks in the first round with Tua Tagovailoa still on the board. So if the Dolphins really wanted Joe Burrow, they would be the only team, in my opinion, that could do it. Because of the philosophy of the Cincinnati Bengals and match that with the firepower that the Dolphins have, if they wanted Joe Burrow, they could get him, in my opinion. And especially with this report that they've retracted that they won't trade down, which is a weird thing to say. Or that's a little, I don't know if I believe that necessarily. But if that is true, that they are willing to trade down, that makes this even more likely, in my opinion. Now, like I said, I just think it's too good of a match with the Bengals' history of building through the draft, the Dolphins with all this ammo in the draft. Not only do they have a bunch of first-round picks, but they have a ton of second to third to fourth to fifth-round picks that they could use. I think they have the most draft picks in franchise history. Is it all worth it for Joe Burrow? I mean, it's not worth it. I would say that. I think you can make an argument that just using keeping your 2 first-round picks and picking Tua Tagovailoa isn't a bad idea either. I love Tua. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. So in saying that, I do think it is a little backwards to get rid of all of your picks to get one player when you could just stay pat and take a franchise quarterback. But there's a lot of rumors with a lot of teams wanting Tua Tagovailoa and Joe Burrow. So it would get a little dangerous if the Dolphins did stay at 5. I think the Dolphins are going to most likely have to trade up regardless of what happens. Whether they want to get Tua or Joe Burrow, I think they will have to trade up because whatever the Chargers do in free agency is going to greatly affect the draft. Same thing with the Carolina Panthers. If they get rid of Cam Newton, they're going to want a quarterback. So what the Dolphins are most likely going to have to either trade up to get Detroit's pick or if they want Joe Burrow, they can get Cincinnati's pick. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. But like I said, the matches are just too great. I feel like the philosophy in the Bengals and the fact that we have all these draft picks and the fact that our owner really, really, really wants a quarterback and he might just get his way this time. Because like I said, the last 2 years, it hasn't worked out that way. Now, Chris Greer and Brian Flores, we don't know if they agree with this. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do. They do want Joe Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow is a great player. He fits all the criteria that the Dolphins want in a leader. They continue to talk about it this offseason. They want great leadership with their quarterbacks. That's the most important thing. And that's the reason Ryan Fitzpatrick really forced their hand is because they were kind of contradicting themselves and being a little bit hypocritical with starting Josh Rosen because he wasn't the best leader in that locker room. The team did not rally around Josh Rosen. They rallied around Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I think all of those things lead us to a potential Joe Burrow. This could be a historic moment for the Dolphins. If this ends up working out, this would be pretty killer, dude. I would be all for it. If the Dolphins did do this, I wouldn't be mad about it. I could make an argument against it, but I wouldn't be upset if they did it. Because we need a quarterback. I don't care what it is. The most important thing in this draft is getting a quarterback. If we come out of this draft without a quarterback, in my opinion, that's a huge failure. We could have a killer draft. We could have 3-4 Pro Bowlers come out of this draft. But if we didn't get the franchise quarterback that we need, I still feel that that's a great failure because you have an opportunity to get two guys that are special, in my opinion. And this report, I think, makes me even more excited for the draft because of the uncertainty of what is going to happen. I mean, if you're a Detroit Lions fan right now, you've got to be the happiest person ever because you really hold all the cards right now, especially if Joe Burrow is picked number 1. You really just kind of dictate a lot of other people's future. So it's going to be interesting. It's an interesting report that Stephen Ross wants Joe Burrow. I think he's sick and tired of it. This franchise desperately needs a marquee player in a face of the franchise. They haven't had that since Dan Marino. They haven't had a superstar player who, we can all rally around. I mean, look what the Chiefs would, what Patrick Mahomes has done for that fan base. The Dolphins need an Andrew Luck. They need a Peyton Manning. They need a Dan Marino. They need a Tom Brady. They need someone like that desperately. I mean, it's been over 20 years now since we've had that, and this franchise and this fan base deserves it. And I feel like one of those two, if not both of them, will become that for a franchise. I like them both a lot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but we'll see what the Dolphins do. It'd be awesome though if we. I mean, like I said, wouldn't be against it. You know what I'm saying? So, if they did it. But you definitely could make an argument against it. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. It's a little bit related to the story we just discussed. The Dolphins are prepared to move up in the draft. If the Dolphins want to move up to number 1 to pick for LSU's Joe Burrow or another pick for any other player, they'll have the ammunition to get the deal done. This week, Chris Greer, who has a bevy of picks this year, publicly acknowledged the potential for a big jump on the board. So I just wanted to run through that very quickly. It's another little nugget to the whole Joe Burrow situation. If you didn't watch the Senior Bowl press conference, he said, yes, if we want to, we will, and we have more than enough to do so. So he publicly acknowledged, yeah, if we want to, we can. And so it's just another interesting nugget there to the whole draft speculation. This next news story should bring a smile on every Dolphins face, in my opinion. Dolphins expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to return. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. So this is great news, in my opinion. This is great news. Excuse me. A little bit of a sneeze coming on. Dolphins expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to return. The Dolphins fully expect to see quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick back on the field in 2020. GM Chris Greer told reporters this week, this jives with previous comments from the GM, who earlier this month said the plan right now is for Fitzmagic and Josh Rosen to stay in the fold. The Dolphins will almost certainly select their quarterback of the future early in the draft, but in any circumstance, they'd love to have their veteran back. In 2019, Fitzpatrick was a bright spot for the Fins in an otherwise rocky year. The 37-year-old would be a perfect bridge quarterback for a young quarterback. And his $8 million salary for 2020 would be cost prohibitive, particularly since the Dolphins have ample cap room heading into March. So again, I've talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot. I think he had his best season ever. He carried a team. I don't think you can ever say, oh, Ryan Fitzpatrick carried a team. In 2019, Ryan Fitzpatrick carried a team. One of the worst rosters we've ever seen in NFL history. He carried them to 5 wins. Really should have won 7 of them. Definitely should have won 6 if it wasn't for the refs. So, which is insane. That's 1 game away from 500. If you could look, there's 2 games in that season where things could have gone differently, then the Dolphins would have won them. If Xavier Howard doesn't get hurt in the Steelers game, they would have won that game. Juju Smith couldn't do anything when he was out there. And unfortunately, he obviously suffered that injury. And then if you look at the Steelers game, or not the Steelers game, the Jets game, the refs, and the Bills game as well. That was a very winnable game too. So, like I said, Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Bills on the road, not at home. The Ryan Fitzpatrick carried this team. And the Redskins game. I completely forgot about that, too. That was a very winnable game as well, if we don't go for 2 at the end of the game. So you could definitely make a case for 7 games. If we don't go for 2, we go to overtime, I guarantee we win that game. And if we, the refs don't kill us against the Jets, I think those are 2, should have been wins. So, and you can make an argument for 8, to be honest with you. So, like I said, I think this was the best season he ever had because of that. He carried a football team. And it's going to be nice to see him come back. If the roster's more competitive, you sit your first round pick behind him. You let Ryan Fitzpatrick do his thing this last season, and we set up for hopefully a long 10 to 15 years of a great quarterback coming into play after he's gone. And I think that would be great. And I know people bring this up a lot, but it would be very similar to what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. They were still a very competitive team, but they had Patrick Mahomes in the fold. Then they move on for him they move on from Alex Smith with Patrick Mahomes coming up in his second year, and then the rest is history. So I think we could do very similar things with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I'm actually excited to see what Ryan Fitzpatrick does with a better roster. Like I said, you could easily make the argument that this roster could have won 8 games. Definitely 7. If it wasn't for, stupid things happening. That's pretty interesting if you think about it that way. Like, a lot of teams lose close games and we could have won this game easily. Surprisingly, this team could have, which is insane. This roster was really bad. He led, not to mention Ryan Fitzpatrick led a top 10 passing offense when he got the start back. So when you look at all of those things, you have to bring Ryan Fitzpatrick back for another year. And if the roster becomes more competitive, the sky is the limit, because I feel like he's playing his best football right now. Like I said, he carried a bad roster this year, and I'm very excited to see what he does with a better roster and a better defense. So we'll see what happens. But it's very good news that he's coming back this year. All right, this next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Just a couple little nuggets on different players. One of them is Albert Wilson, and we got one on Kilgore. Albert Wilson started... Oh, God, I'm about to sneeze again. Apologize. Albert Wilson started this Dolphins career off with a bang in 2018. Again, this is news on Albert Wilson, Daniel Kilgore, Bobby McCain. We got some news on Rashad Jones, all in this one report. So this comes from Pro Football Rumors, in case I wasn't clear. Albert Wilson started his Dolphins career off with a bang in 2018, but a serious hip injury quickly derailed his momentum. He wasn't the same player this past year and ended up racking up only 351 yards and 1 touchdown in 13 games. Wilson has 1 more year left on his deal at $9.5 million, but it's entirely non-guaranteed. The blazing fast slot receiver has shown a lot of flashes, but that's a hefty price to pay for a slot receiver. To that end, Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, writes, the Miami is likely to discuss a restructuring this week. It sounds like Wilson is going to have to accept a pay cut if he wants to stay in Miami for 2020. So we know this about Albert Wilson, and we've discussed this on last week's episode. I would love to see him back, because the last few games of the year, he was back to old Albert Wilson. And I think that's going to continue to trend in the right direction. So if the Dolphins are smart, they bring back Albert Wilson, in my opinion. Because I just think he brings a lot to the offense. All right, so here's some more some more notes on the Dolphins. Speaking of players who might... This is from Pro Football Rumors. Speaking of players who might take pay cuts, Jackson writes that Rashad Jones returning under his current contract is inconceivable. Jones is due $11 million in 2020, but only $2 million of that is guaranteed. Jackson writes that as of right now, there is no plans to start Bobby McCain and Eric Rowe at safety, but Jones returning on a restructured deal isn't entirely out of the question. Jones made the Pro Bowl in 2017, but his relationship with the franchise quickly deteriorated, and for a while it looked like a divorce was inevitable. He had a falling out with Adam Gase, but was apparently able to patch things up with new head coach Brian Flores. So yeah, we've talked about Rashad a lot. The Dolphins don't need him. So whatever happens with Rashad Jones, I could care less. The Dolphins do not need him, and to be honest with you, he doesn't fit the scheme. He's not versatile enough, in my opinion. You look at what Eric Rowe was able to do at safety. You can literally match him up with anybody. Since we primarily play man-to-man, you really have to, and especially if it's cover one, you have to ask one of your safeties to match up with someone. And Eric Rowe did a great job with that when he had to match up with tight ends. Like, an insane, like, the Eric Rowe that we got at the beginning of the year, and then when he switched to safety, are completely two different people. Like, seriously. So, he doesn't fit the scheme. And we have another news story coming up where if we get this particular player, then he fits the scheme way more. But that's why Bobby McCain was switched to free safety. Even though he did an okay job, he wasn't really that good at it. The Dolphins can find better talent there, in my opinion, if they wanted to, especially with free agency. There's a couple guys, but he doesn't fit that position either. I think the best place he could fit would be free safety, but he's more of a Tyrann Mathieu guy. Even though Tyrann Mathieu is a better man-to-man safety, you really just want to let those guys roam the middle of the field. Be your cover one robber, do something like that. But this team really doesn't have that. It's really just a matchup game with this defense, and then you disguise stuff off of that. So I just don't think you really would like a 32-year-old Rashad Jones being matched up with Travis Kelce at or one of the premier tight ends. Like, he just isn't that great at it to begin with. And I think he's just more of a playmaker where you just kind of let him go. If he's in a Seattle scheme in a cover 3, he's perfect for that, especially at this point in his career. We just really let him make plays. And so I just don't feel like the Dolphins need him to come back. I would like to see another safety come in that fits the scheme a little bit better. All right. This last news story is about Daniel, or not the last news story, but this last little note here is on Daniel Kilgore. This also comes from Pro Football Rumors. Another Dolphin starter on the chopping block is center Daniel Kilgore. Kilgore is due a non-guaranteed $3 million, and Miami can cut him right away before the start of the season with no cap penalty. Jackson expects the team to look for an upgrade at center this offseason, and he points out that GM Chris Grier was recently non-committal about his status. Yeah, this needs to happen. Daniel Kilgore, not only is he okay to maybe a good center, he can't stay healthy. So even when you're on the field, you're not that great, and then when you're barely on the field to begin with. So yeah, the Dolphins would be smart to move on from Daniel Kilgore. The whole offensive line really needs to be revamped, literally, and that's something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Is the lines of scrimmage are the most important. The defensive backs, I think you can, especially the defensive backs, I think you'll be fine. Xavier Howard and the uprising of Nick Needham. Your back end isn't that bad. You have Eric Rowe, who's a really good, I would say, joker safety. I don't think he's a strong safety. I would call him a joker safety, where you can really just put him anywhere you want. And then you really don't have a free safety right now, but you don't have a defensive line and you don't have an offensive line. Those are issues. You were able to get away with 5 wins this previous season without those two things. And if you had those two things, you would have won a lot more games. So they need to fix those issues first. Because if you look at the offensive line and defensive line, it desperately needs talent. And Daniel Kilgore is one of those guys where you look at it and you're like, the only guy that I really am okay with keeping right now is, there's 3 offensive linemen that I like on this team right now. Shaq Calhoun, not Daniel Kilgore, Shaq Calhoun, Jesse Davis. Who's the other guy? Oh, Michael Dieter. Michael Dieter showed promise at the end of the year. He was getting better. Shaq Calhoun, I feel like, was good enough for what he was. And who did I leave off? Shaq Calhoun, Michael Dieter. Oh, Jesse Davis was just solid. So yeah, I mean that's a huge area of need, and Daniel Kilgore is one of those players that I think it's time to let that go. So. Trying to move up, we're taking a while right now, almost half an hour just on news. So, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible because we still have to break down free agency. So let's try to get through this as quickly as possible. Dolphins hire a new DBs coach. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Finally, Dolphins are hiring a new defensive backs coach in Gerald Alexander. However I don't know, I think maybe he's a Gerald, maybe he's a girl. As Barry Jackson in the Miami Herald tweets, Alexander is coming from the college ranks where he served as defensive back coach for Cal the past 2 seasons. Alexander was briefly with the Dolphins as a safety during his playing days in 2011. Okay, so this is an interesting news story because there's an interesting tweet about this. Now, I did not know this, but apparently Cal's defense and their secondary was highly ranked. And a lot of people dedicated the fact that they were so highly ranked to this defensive backs coach and what he's been able to do with those guys in college. So I can't find the tweet, guys, and I don't want to sit here mulling around like a crazy person because that doesn't make for a good show. But you guys can find the tweet somewhere. It's on the team stream for the Dolphins. But this guy is highly coveted. He interviewed for multiple jobs, I believe. I think he interviewed for the Eagles job as well. The Dolphins were able to snag him. So this guy's a talented coach. He did a really good job with Cal's defense. Apparently, I can't remember how high ranked they were, but their pass defense was very highly. I think it was top 5. So I did not know that about Cal's defense. So again, the Dolphins hire a very talented coach, and hopefully he can continue that trend with the Dolphins. So let's see here. God, I got so many tabs. I'm sneezing all over the place. All right, let's see here. I think. We have one more news story left. This is the most interesting. I saved the best for last. That was probably a mistake. But this is the best news story that we have to discuss. Well, second best, I would say, because Joe Burrow's situation just gets your brain going a little bit. But this is a very interesting one. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins to pursue Patriots free agents. This is very interesting. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Patriots free agents Devin McCourty, Joe Thuney, and Kyle Van Noy will likely have many suitors. One is expected to be the Dolphins, with Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, writing that Brian Flores holds McCourty in very high regard, and the team will pursue Thuney and Van Noy. All three are unrestricted free agents to be. Van Noy and McCourty played under Flores during their time as defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. So this is very interesting. The fact that the Dolphins will pursue Kyle Van Noy, Devin McCourty, and Joe Thuney. All three of those positions fill needs. The Dolphins need guard. Joe Thuney is a good guard, and he's young. He's only 27 years old. So he's he's a huge upgrade if we got Joe Thuney. Devin McCourty, older, still a very good player. Still a very good player though. It would be more of a short-term deal, I would assume. And Kyle Van Noy, young, 27 years old, and one of the better outside linebackers in the NFL. So all three of those players would fit great needs on this team. Free safety, like I brought up earlier in the show, is a very, very, very... It's not a big need. It's not. It would be very low on my list because offensive, defensive lines, in my opinion, are a priority. But it still does fit a need. And Kyle Van Noy fills a huge need, which is a defensive line, because he's basically, in this scheme, think of him as a defensive end. He sets the edge in the run game. He's very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Pivotal in the run game in this defense. Your outside linebackers in this defense need to set the edge in the run game, and like I said, they're pivotal to having a great run defense. So having him plugged into this defense, I've said in the past podcasts that we're looking for a Kyle Van Noy for this defense. So the fact that we could get Kyle Van Noy would be awesome. And like I said, Joe Thuney. To just bring up some of the stats really quickly on Kyle Van Noy. So last season in 2019, Kyle Van Noy had his best season of his career. He had 6.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 2 defensive touchdowns, and he had 56 tackles. I don't bring up Pro Football Focus rankings for these guys because I don't really like Pro Football Focus, but he's 6'3", 250 pounds, and he's actually 28 years old. So still in the prime of his career. He's only played, this would be his 7th season coming up. So like I said, if you sign Kyle Van Noy, he could be a part of your defense for 3 or 4 years due to his age. So this would be a big get for the Dolphins. Just watch. I would recommend any Dolphins fan, if you've never watched Kyle Van Noy a lot, you had to have watched him twice, or more than twice, because obviously we play him twice a year. But Kyle Van Noy is a great player. He's one of the more underrated players in the league, in my opinion. He does all the dirty work. He is a very good player. He's actually a really good athlete. And they have him listed as a middle linebacker. He plays he mainly plays outside linebacker, but he's a very good player and, fits the criteria of what the Dolphins need. He's big, physical, I've seen him do it a million times, just, destroying tackles in the run game. So, and guards for that matter. So yeah, Kyle Van Noy would be awesome if the Dolphins got him. I don't know what his market is like. I don't know. And again, like I said, he does fit a huge need though. He would greatly improve our run defense. And you look at Devin McCourty. So if you look at Devin McCourty's stats, obviously, arguably had the best year of his career. He had 5 picks, 2 forced fumbles, 58 tackles. The downside to Devin McCourty is his age. He's 32. His market would be a little interesting. What his market looks like. Would he be willing to go to a Dolphins team that is more of an up-and-coming team, not really competing for a championship yet? That's where it kind of gets murky. But Devin McCourty would be a good addition to the Dolphins, I would say. He'd be an okay addition. I would rather the Dolphins go a little bit younger there, and maybe find someone late, really either mid-draft, or they get someone like a Justin Simmons in free agency who's a little bit younger. But again, would be a good addition. I would to the Dolphins. Now, Joe Thuney. Like I said again, don't know why I can't speak English. Like I've said a million times this so far. If you look at Kyle Van Noy and Joe Thuney, they fit two of the biggest needs of the Dolphins defense right now. Number one, Kyle Van Noy fills a huge need on the defensive line. Helps the run defense a lot. You look at Joe Thuney, would help the offensive line a lot. So those two fill huge needs for the Dolphins. So those two would be priority in my opinion. So this is the first time I'm going to bring up Pro Football Rumor stats. Like I said, I really don't, not Pro Football Rumors, Pro Football Focus. I don't believe in these numbers because if you look at some of these players that rank like super low, it's like why? Because they're so good. But Joe Thuney, and I know that's all analytics and stuff like that, but the point is Joe Thuney's a guard, so his stats, they don't have stats really. In Pro Football Focus, their stats for offensive linemen are really the only ones you can find. So Joe Thuney in 2019 only allowed 1 sack all year. He played over 1,000 snaps, which is second to guard. So he's very durable. He only allowed 1 sack. His overall, if you want to listen to this, Pro Football grade is a 77. So it's not the greatest grade in the world. It's close to an 80, but it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But the man only allowed 1 sack and played the second most snaps of any guard in the National Football League. As of just someone who's watched a lot of football over the years. If I was a GM and I said, okay, this dude only allowed 1 sack, played over 1,000 snaps in the NFL, I'm going to take that guy as a guard. He's probably not, I would say, top 10, maybe? I mean, I actually would put Joe Thuney in my top 10 guards in the NFL. But my thing is, especially for offensive linemen, the number one thing I look at is your durability. Because those offensive linemen come and go like chickens in a hen house, for God's sakes. We're cracking eggs left and right. So you need those. You need. I think that's the first thing you have to look at. And for me, I like Joe Thuney a lot. He's only 27 years old. He's an athletic guard. He ran a 4.9 40. So this guy, young, very durable. Only allowed 1 sack. Maybe not the greatest year for him last year. The Patriots were very inconsistent in their run game, but I like Joe Thuney a lot, and I'm excited. I would be very excited if the Dolphins were able to obtain such a player. Like I'd be running naked through the streets if we got Joe Thuney, because to have a guard of his level to start every single game, and if he only allows 1 sack, I'll take that. I'll take that right now. So. I would love that if the Dolphins were able to get Joe Thuney. So, again, reacting to this report that the Dolphins will pursue Devin McCourty, Kyle Van Noy, and Joe Thuney, the ones that I want the most, the player that I would want the most is probably Joe Thuney. But Kyle Van Noy is a close, I think they're tied. I really like Kyle Van Noy. I think he's a very good player. And I would be very happy if he was in this defense. And I like Joe Thuney a lot because of his durability. He's a good guard. I don't think he's a great guard, but he's a good guard, and he's very, very durable. And I would love to have him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I would be very, very happy with either one of those two being a Dolphin. Let's see here. Okay, so we're done with the news. Whew! I feel like I talk too fast sometimes. And I need to get better at that. But, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We have to break down the free agents. We break down, before we get into the fan Q&A, we break down a specific, can't speak English, a specific positional group each and every single week. Almost went full Jeff Globman with the amount of us there. But we break down a positional group each and every single week. This week for our free agency positional group will be cornerback. So we're gonna be. This is my list of cornerbacks that the Dolphins should or should not get. But in my opinion, these are the best DBs or cornerbacks of this free agency going into 2020. So, let's start with the first. We're going to start with older guys first. So we'll start with Chris Harris. Now, Chris Harris, he's 30 years old. He's a perfect defensive back for this scheme. He's a great man-to-man coverage corner. We know that about Chris Harris. Like, he's an outstanding man-to-man corner. He's 30. He's at the tail end of his career. His prime is behind him. Once you hit 30 as a DB, I think your best years are probably behind you. Rarely does it get better. Like, you have to be like a Charles Woodson or someone like a Rod Woodson, someone who's got like great or Darryl Green, who's got insane longevity. But who knows? Chris Harris could have it because he hasn't had a bad year so far. But so is it a yes or a no on Chris Harris? Should the Dolphins pursue him? Should they not? Here's my thing with Chris Harris. He's older, probably out of his prime. I think he's going to be at max gets a 2-year deal in free agency. He's more of a contender type of a guy. I don't think the Dolphins, building something here I don't think Chris Harris is like the right route to go, in my opinion. Plus, defensive backs. I don't think the Dolphins. I don't think cornerback should be one of the Dolphins' main priorities in free agency. Like I said, they have Nick Needham, they have Xavier Howard. Nick Needham is a solid 2. I think he proved that this year that he can be more than enough than what you need at the second cornerback spot. Let all rookies and pass defense. Nick Needham did. Sorry, guys. So I think you're okay at cornerback. You don't need anything. So I'm gonna say no on Chris Harris because of his age, because of his market. I just don't think he's a good investment for the Dolphins. Jimmy Smith. Another older corner. He's 31 years old. Had an interception. A very you look at Jimmy Smith, and all this dude does is man press. But he is a very big corner to be able to run with some of the best receivers in the league. He's 6'2", 210, which is insane for a corner to be that big and be that successful. Has a very bad injury history. Can't stay healthy. Physical corner. Great in the run game. Just too old. Just not a good investment for the Dolphins. I'm going to have to say no on Jimmy Smith because of age. Sorry, guys. I have to blow my nose again. Because of age and because of his market, I'm going to have to say no on Jimmy Smith. He just wouldn't be a wise investment for a young team who's an up-and-coming team for obvious reasons. All right, let's go to Logan Ryan. So Logan Ryan is another older corner, but he's 28 years old, so probably, I would say, dead in the prime of his career. He's going to be a free agent. Obviously had a solid year with Tennessee. Has a very good background in this defense as he's ran it with New England before and had a lot of success with it. I like Logan Ryan a lot. He's a bigger corner. He's 5'11", 195. He's great in press coverage. He's young. He's going into his 7th season. He had four forced fumbles, 4 picks, 4 sacks, and 113 tackles. That's a really good stat line for a corner. Like I said, he's a physical corner. So he's a great instinctual corner as well, and you could see that because the Titans blitzed him a lot. And again, I think he's a great cover corner in this defense. When we play a lot of cover one, and like I said, he did that at a high level in New England. And I think he can do it again. So I'm not going to say no on this. I'm going to say, if he's a Dolphin, I'm not going to be mad at it. You pair him with Xavier Howard, you have one of the better cornerback duos in the National Football League. That's not a bad thing to have, especially in this day and age with pass-happy offenses. So I'm going to give this a pass. I don't think the Dolphins should actively pursue Logan Ryan, but if the Dolphins somehow stumbled upon him and he was signed, I don't think that's a bad investment at all. This next player we're going to talk about is Bradley Roby. Young corner, believe it or not, only a year younger than Logan Ryan, which kind of blows my mind. So he's younger. So is it a yes or a no? He's a bigger corner. He's 5'11", about 194. Had 38 tackles, a sack, 1 forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. If you compare that to Logan Ryan's stats, there's a huge gap there. Similar builds, similar play styles. I think Logan Ryan is a more consistent and a better player, though, than Bradley Roby. So I'm going to have to say no on Bradley Roby. I think he's too inconsistent. He has his highlight reel moments, and then he has his not so highlight reel moments too often. He's too inconsistent in my opinion. So I'm gonna have to say a no on Bradley Roby, because I think he's gonna command a lot of money because he plays defensive back. He's a little younger. He comes from the Romeo Crennel type of a defense. So I'm gonna say no on that. I'm gonna say no just because it's too inconsistent and not worth the investment because of that. Next player we're going to talk about, we're getting into a little bit younger, Trey Waynes. It's blowing my mind right now that Logan Ryan's 28. I really expected Logan Ryan to be like 30 years old, because he left New England, went to Tennessee. It's crazy. This is like his second free agency really, and he's only 28 years old. Anyway, Trey Waynes, is it a yes or a no? I'm going to say it's a pass, because Trey Waynes is 27 years old. I feel like he's an underrated, under the radar name. He's a great cover corner. He fits the cover one scheme the Dolphins want to run. He's very athletic. He's very consistent. He doesn't have great ball skills. That's the one thing I don't like about Trey Waynes. He's not going to make a lot of plays when the ball is thrown at him, but he does force a lot of incompletions. My point is, it's not that he can't cover, it's that he just doesn't have great ball skills in terms of like picking a ball off and making plays. Like X or someone like that who can change who can change the game because of their ball skill ability. He can't do that, but he's a great cover corner. So I'm going to give it a pass. Should the Dolphins actively pursue Trey Waynes? No. Would he be a good signing? Would he be a good investment? I would say yes. Yes, he would. The last player we're going to talk about is Ronald Barbie. Now, Ronald Barbie, young player, 26 years old. He's a little bit smaller than the other corners we've talked about. Weighs a little bit less, right around the same height. An athletic freak, and again, a great cover one corner. He did a lot of that with Rex Ryan. I like Ronald Barbie a lot. He's got great ball skills. He's great. He's a great athlete. I like Ronald Barbie a lot. I think that would be a pretty sick combo if the Dolphins got Xavier Howard and Ronald Barbie. Had 2 interceptions, even though it was literally in and out of the lineup. I'm going to have to say no to Ronald Barbie, though. Even though I love the idea of Ronald Barbie and Xavier Howard, he would be a very bad investment because of his market. Not only because of his market, but because of his injury history. He can't stay on the field. So I'm not going to invest into a player that I'm going to be paying a good amount of money to. That's not going to be here week in, week out. So I'm going to have to say no to Ronald Barbie. And I think the only ones we passed was Logan Ryan and Trey Waynes. Both of those players can stay healthy. They're there, if not 16 games, at least 14 of them. And they're both have experience in a cover one system and are both, in my opinion, very good corners. And if they were matched up with Xavier Howard, that could be a very special combination. So those two I could stomach being signed if the Dolphins were like, okay, we're going to need Logan Ryan. But my finally cherry on top of the sundae when talking about cornerbacks and free agency, the Dolphins don't need any of those players. Like I said, they shouldn't actively pursue any of those players because Xavier Howard and Nick Needham, I think, 2 very young players. Nick Needham obviously just was an undrafted free agent. I think you got to give him time to breathe. I think you got to give him time to develop. I liked what I saw from Nick Needham. It started off very rocky. It did not look good in the beginning, but he got significantly better as the year went on. So, and his best game was against the Colts and the Jets. Both times, really. Both Jet games, he was amazing. So, I like the whole Nick Needham coming back and being the number 2. I think he can do that just fine. So, I think the Dolphins really just stay pat and just keep those 2. And just, like I said, let Nick Needham breathe a little bit. Let him develop. Let him do his thing. I think he's got potential. So, let's get into the fan Q&A, ladies and gentlemen, where we answer fans' questions. How many questions we got? We got 21 questions. Hopefully we can get to all of them. So let's start with the first question. This first question comes from Corporate Gamer. He says, again, this is the fan Q&A. First question comes from Corporate Gamer. Alright, first question comes from Corporate Gamer. He says, would you be happy with that would you happy? God, guys, I can't speak English. I apologize. Would you be happy with Eric Armstead and Jack Conklin in free agency? Absolutely. Eric, has had an interesting career up until this point. I think he's played just good enough to be a starter in the league, but this has been his first year of really blossoming into something special. So I think you have to be a little bit wary of that. Is it because of the circumstances of playing with so many great players on a defensive line? I think you have to kind of take that into account. But I like Eric Armstead. I think he fits the scheme perfectly. I don't think he's as good as a Chris Jones, which if you got a Chris Jones, I mean, you're set, dude. But I like Eric Armstead. I think he's a good player in the league, and I would be very happy with that signing. And Jake Conklin, he's had a lot of injuries. I don't think he's as good as a signing as Joe Thuney would be because of the injury history. But I like Jake a lot. I think Conklin could be a good player. He could be a very good player for us. So, yes, especially if he could stay healthy. So, yeah, I would be happy with that if we got both of those players. This next question comes from SM. SM says, can you read my comment from last week comparing the 2020 quarterback class to the 2012 quarterback class? So, interesting. So, you want to compare those two? I mean, if you go blow for blow with those guys, I mean, you look at the top heaviness of that draft. You look at RG3. You look at Andrew Luck and Ryan Tannehill. Those are the top three quarterbacks of that draft. I would say you compare that to this year. You compare that with Tua, Joe Burrow, and I guess third we'll say Justin Herbert. Sorry guys, I'm gonna sneeze again. Sorry. Which one's better? I would say 2012's is way deeper because you had players like Russell Wilson and Nick Foles. You even had like a Case Keenum and a Kirk Cousins. Man, that draft was very deep. So I would say 2012 gets the edge because of the depth that it has, but this year's is way more top heavy. Like way more top heavy. Now I don't know what the heck Jordan Love's gonna do in the league. They had the kid from Washington. I shouldn't say kid. The grown man from Washington State, who played very well in the Senior Bowl game. One of the wackiest releases I've ever seen in my life. But I think he had 6,000 yards or something crazy. He averaged like 400 yards a game. He looked okay. He looked pretty good in that game. So yeah, there's a lot. You got Shea Patterson. I just don't think it's as deep as 2012, but it's definitely more top heavy. That's for sure. Tua Tagovailoa and Joe Burrow. You could maybe Luck would be better. You're like, okay, Luck's probably a better prospect, but Joe Burrow was better than RG3 was at college, and he was better than he had a better year than Luck ever had in college. So I'll say this class is more top heavy. This next question comes from Hunter. Hunter asks, what is your favorite Dolphin logo over the years? This is not even close. I would say the 70s logo was my favorite. The 80s one was really good. It's a little bit different, but I like it a lot. But, my least favorite logo over the years, I'm going to say it. This is controversial. I'm going to say the 2000s logo is my least favorite. I think the mid and late 90s logo, it's the same logo, right? I'd have to go back and look at it. There might be slight differences, but the logo that you have as yours right now is probably my favorite. As your YouTube avatar or whatever you call it, that's probably my favorite one. But yeah, the 70s or 80s one's probably my favorite. Those two, the 70s one's a little bit saturated in terms of its color. The 80s one's a little bit more fuller in terms of color. But the 2000s one I never liked, and I know people think, well, why the heck don't you pick the 2013 one? I actually don't mind. I actually like the 2013 one. It's grown on me over the years. The 2000s one, well, I'll say the 2012 one, just because, or it was the same one as the 2000s late 90s one. It looks goofy. It looks like a Cartoon Network Dolphin, and I like it. It's not that I like all of our logos. It's not that I don't like it. It's just comparing it to the other ones, I like them more. I don't like this thing staring at me. It looks like it could talk to me, like having a conversation. I don't like that, dude. You need to chill out. The other ones I like just a little bit more. This one just has a little bit too much personality. It looks like too much of a mascot to me, for me. So yeah, so let's break down the logos. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. He asks, should we take the center from Wisconsin in the second round? I would have to do more research on the draft, but I love Wisconsin offensive linemen, I can say that. This next question comes from Hunter. Hunter asks, do you think Kalen Ballage can ever become great? I'm asking because of his size, because his size interests me. No, Kalen Ballage is terrible. He is awful. No. And I hate to say that, because if I ever meet the man, he's probably going to, I doubt he listens to the show. But I shouldn't say he's horrible, but he had a horrible season. Let's say that. He showed so much promise in 2018, and then 2019 was just a disaster. This next question comes from Hunter. Hunter asks, how do you think Jerome has developed as a player so far, and what do you think his ceiling is? His ceiling is the limit. He could go as far as he wants. He has the athletic skills to become a Hall of Fame player. He has the instincts too as well. Him and Raekwon are really good, and Sam is an underrated linebacker as well. I think that's that group of players we can rely on for many years to come. But his ceiling is sky's the limit with Jerome Baker. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, he says, this is Max Draft 1.0. Round 1, Tua Tagovailoa. Round 1, J.K. Dobbins. Round 1, linebacker Murray. Second round, offensive tackle. Second round, offensive tackle. Third round, defensive end. Now, again, to get into the weeds of the draft, I'm going to have to really dive in. So some of these players I need to look at a little bit harder. But your first round's pretty good. I don't think the Dolphins necessarily... I think you need more of an interior defensive end and less an outside linebacker or a middle linebacker in that spot. You need someone who can really push the pocket. Like AJ, which is Espinzenza, or what, I can't remember his name, the guy from Iowa. Like, he's perfect for that. Like, that's the kind of player the Dolphins need. Like a J.J. Watt interior guy who can kind of move around. They desperately need someone like that. So that I could is fine. A later round pick, I guess, I'm okay with that. It kind of fills the need. But J.K. Dobbins is like my third or second favorite player in this draft. I love J.K. Dobbins. So yeah, I like that first round a lot. If we got two and J.K. Dobbins, I'd be over the moon. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan asks, hey Skaggs, are the Marx brothers the most underrated receiver tandem in NFL history? Their stats are still impressive by even today's standards. Yes. You look at their stats together, they rival... I think they're better than really every single duo ever. I can't remember, there maybe like... Stallworth and Swan, Rice and Taylor, Torrey or Holton, what can I think of the other guy? Holton Bruce, Thomas and Sanders, Welker and Moss, like those tandems, their stats are very similar to those, if not better, to be honest with you. So yeah, I would say yes. They're very underrated. 70s Dolphins asks, can you all Miami team a 53-man roster? Probably. I could definitely do that. I would have to do an entire episode. That would be something I'm interested in though. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, Skaggs, I really enjoy your show. First thing every Monday. I have some possible trades for you. The Patriots offer you a first-round pick for Rosen and Preston Williams. What do you do? Also, receive an offer for a fourth-round pick for Rashad Jones. What's your move? I'll trade Rashad Jones for a fourth-round pick. I have no issue doing that. If the Patriots said I want Rosen and Preston Williams, I'm hanging the phone up for a first-round pick. I'm not interested in that. Preston Williams is too talented, and Rosen is still got potential. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. Corporate Gamer asks, not a question, but just wanted to say salute to Kobe Bryant. Yeah. One of the most influential athletes of all time. We all grew up doing the stab, the two stab and the fade away, or the two stab drive by, all that kind of stuff. And, it's a very sad day for sure. Kobe Bryant was one of the, I mean, you can't say enough about Kobe Bryant and how great he was. So yeah, it's definitely prayers with his thoughts and prayers with his family, and just a very sad day for the nation, really. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. Corporate Gamer asks, would you have interest in signing Anthony Harris in free agency, free safety Anthony Harris? I don't think he's the safety the Dolphins really. I don't think he's versatile enough. He's a tough safety though. He hits hard. I just don't think he's. I guess yeah. I think I could see him fitting. I just don't think he's the perfect fit. This next question comes from NC. He says, can the Dolphins have a playoff season if they don't draft the quarterback this draft? Yes, but it would be I would riot if they didn't. This next question comes from Tony. Tony asks, he says, do you think Miami should trade next year's Houston pick for a first-round pick this year? Yes, I would do that. Yes, because this draft is very deep, in my opinion, in certain positional groups. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. Corporate Gamer asks, why do many fans think Jalen Hurts is worth a first-round pick? I don't know who the heck thinks that, when scouts have compared him to Tyrod Taylor and gave him a fourth-round grade. Yeah, he's at best a fourth-round pick. I was very disappointed in the way he moved in the pocket at the Senior Bowl. Granted, his offensive line didn't do him too many favors, but he did not move as well as I thought he could. He did not move great at all. I don't know what the issue was, but you watch him in college, he's a very smooth player in the pocket, the way he's able to get out of trouble. He struggled to do that in the Senior Bowl, and that was very alarming to me. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, if for whatever reason you don't take a quarterback 5, would you take Eason or Love at 18 if they were on the board? I would, what do you mean 18? In the first round? No. I would wait if I could. If they go in the first round, God bless. But I would wait till second to third round, somewhere in there. This next question comes from Mark. Mark asks, I think the Dolphins are interested in Justin Herbert. Do you possibly? Love? No. If the Dolphins got Justin Herbert, I would be very, very... I accidentally clicked off that. Very disappointed. I'm not a huge Justin Herbert fan. I'm not sold on Justin Herbert. So, yeah, I would definitely not be happy with that. I wouldn't be happy with it, I would say. But, I mean, he could develop into something. He's got the talent, too. I just don't think he's as a sure thing as the other two are. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. He asks, what do you think of my 2020 quarterback draft class rankings? Number 1, 2, and number 2, Joe Burrow. Number 3, Justin Herbert. Number 4, so this is just the quarterbacks, yeah. Number 3, Justin Herbert. Number 4, Jordan Love. Number 5, Jacob Eason. Number 6, Jake Fromm. The other ones really don't matter. 1, 2, Joe Burrow. I could see the argument for that. I think the 3 is a lock. I think those are the 3 best quarterbacks in the draft. 2, Burrow, Herbert. And you could really flip Herbert and Love, and I wouldn't be mad at you. So, yeah, it's a pretty good ranking. This next question comes from Adam. He says, were you a Kobe Bryant fan? Yes, very, I remember his last game of the year, just rooting hard for him to get to 60 points and, against Utah. And, I loved, I don't have a team. I'm not a Heat fan. I don't have a team in the NBA. I just watch the NBA as a fan. So, yes, Kobe was, I was a huge fan of Kobe Bryant because of that. And, one of the more entertaining athletes ever, one of the more fun players to watch ever, one of the greatest personalities ever, had some of the, the greatest moments, jumping up on the scorer's table, getting Matt Barnes' face, all of that stuff. Just one of the greatest, most entertaining athletes ever, and he will be. I was devastated when I found out, and it's tragic news. And again, all of our thoughts and prayers are with his family right now. It's just tough, not only to lose a husband, but to lose a daughter as well the same day is just insane. It's very tragic, very, very, very sad news. This next question comes from Josh. I probably should end off on that, not to answer another question because it is such sad news. But yeah, if you grew up in the 90s or 2000s, how could you not? If you're a sports fan, Kobe Bryant was a huge part of your life because, he was sport, especially he was basketball for a lot of those years. So yeah, it's just devastating news. Well, that is going to be it for this week's episode. It sucks we're going to have to leave it off on such a sad note. Again, just a tough week for sports fans and people all over the world, really, especially if you grew up in that era. of the Gasol Lakers with Kobe, and obviously the Shaq Lakers with Kobe. And yeah, it's very, very, very sad news. Sucks we're gonna have to leave off the show like that. But again, can't say it enough. And thoughts and prayers to his family. It's just very sad news. So hope to see you guys next week. Sucks we have to leave it on such sad news. But that is it for this week, and I'll see you guys in the next one.